All right, next up we have Antara Ganguli, and she is going to share with us a little something about gender transformative education, the pathway to tackling gender stereotypes. Antara,
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you for having me here. And as always, it's a pleasure to be in the company of Pauline, Susanna, and others who are going to be speaking today. My name is Antara. I'm the director of the UNGEI Secretariat, and I'm going to be talking about gender stereotypes and how schools and education platforms could be a way to address the harmful gender norms that I believe, but there's a lot of evidence to show this too, underpin so much of the inequality and hardship and poverty that we experience in the world today. But first, let me start with a reflection based on what Pauline was saying on this point around girls' education, gender parity, and gender equality in education. This reminded me of some comments I'd made at Transforming Education Summit earlier this year, and it's very relevant here, so I'm going to share that with you. 106 years ago, there was a letter published in the New York Times which said that letting women vote would mean a degradation of human fiber. I mean, this is literally what the New York Times published. Hence, concluded William T. Sedgwick, the author, it will probably never come. For mankind will not lightly abandon at the call of a few fanatics, fanatics here being, of course, those who believe that women should vote, the hard-earned achievements of the ages. Now, this letter was written by a teacher, a very highly regarded professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he was not alone in his views at MIT, where even in 1950, a move to admit women students as undergraduates was rejected. 1950, they would not have women students as undergraduates. Arguments were made that it was a waste of public expenditure because to educate women in science and spend that amount of money on them would never pay off because they would never work. But also that so much studying of science would be bad for women's bodies and minds. I am bringing this up because I want to remind us that girls' education, the way it is situated today, is not the way it was always situated. And that in fact, the fight for gender equality, the fight for women to vote, came from the same place that the fight for girls' education came from. And if the history of girls' education is deeply political, so is its present. And the conversation we are having today very much illustrates that. But let me give you another example. Not just in Afghanistan, where, by the way, we have completely failed girls, but I mean, all of you can think about the number of speeches and concept notes and annual reports you have seen where girls' education is still talked about by pointing out the benefit that the educated girl will have on other people, especially her unborn children. So we put the picture of a smiling 6-year-old child in pigtails and we say, yes, let's educate her because one day this child will become a mother. So it may be 106 years later from that New York Times article, but apparently we still need reasons to invest in girls that have nothing to do with the girls themselves. So this is why I want to make the case that we need to put more effort and investment into exploring not just how we can achieve SDG 4, but how can we use education platforms and education actors and education infrastructure to achieve SDG 5. All children, we agree, should be able to dream about their future without limits or restrictions. Yet, there is a universal force in the world that constricts children's aspirations and really impacts violent behavior, and that's gender stereotypes. A stereotype is a widely held belief about the character and behavior of all members of a group. So when we say X racial group dances really well, that's actually a stereotype. When we say X ethnic community is very lazy, that's a stereotype. When we say women like to be nurturing and men are great at being assertive, those are all stereotypes. There is a lot of evidence to show that gender stereotypes really negatively impact children, from their making decisions on careers all the way into harmful relationships, which can be violent. So for example, boys feel pressure to go into high earning sectors because they learn early that the only expectation of men is to provide economic support for their households. Meanwhile, girls gravitate to careers in the care economy because women are associated with caregiving. That's what they see. So these norms get entrenched and normalized, and they become, in many cases, dangerous and violent. Yet, what we have never really explored is what if we begin to address this gender socialization that children go through from birth, so that these children question these stereotypes, that these children begin to see what gender equality experts have been saying for hundreds of years now, that gender is a social construct. It is not biology. I'll give you an example. We've known for more than 2 decades now that a boy who grows up in a household where he witnesses domestic violence or intimate partner violence, not even experiences it, just witnesses it, is 8 times more likely to grow up to be a perpetrator himself. And a girl who grows up in a household where she witnesses this is twice as likely to enter into a relationship when she is older, where she will be the target of gender-based violence. So we have known this information for 2.5 decades. What have we done for these children? Where have we created opportunities for these children to deal with the trauma that they're going through in their homes and learn to reject the harmful norms and behaviors they have seen there and aspire to be a different kind of adult when they grow up? So this year, UNGEI launched the first multi-country program to end gender stereotypes through classroom. And in this program, what we're trying to do in 3 countries, India, Bangladesh, and Niger, is through play-based, activity-based, reflection-based curricula, help children question what they see around them. So we don't want to tell them this is wrong and this is right. We want them to ask questions. Let me share some examples of what that looks like. So this was in a program that was done in India, in one of the most patriarchal states in India, in Haryana, and it was actually a program that I had been involved in when I was with UNICEF India. We worked with 10 to 12-year-olds only through games. So we would play snakes and ladders. We would, come up with different games that we would play together to help them ask questions. One of those games was, we asked them to keep a diary for, I see something in the chat, am I speaking too long? We asked them to keep a diary of how much time their mothers and fathers or male and female caregivers at home spend on different things. So that included leisure, sleep, watching TV, hanging out at the corner tea stall or coffee shop with their friends. That included work, paid work, unpaid work, that included cooking, that included cleaning, that included bathing the children, that included helping children do homework. At the end of those 2 weeks, these 10 and 11-year-old boys and girls, I mean, it was the co-ed schools, the girls came back not surprised. Yes, our mothers spend a lot more time doing XYZ than our fathers. The boys came back furious. They were like, I don't get this. Why is it that my father sleeps 8 hours a day? My mom seems to only sleep 5 hours a day because I heard her in the morning at 6 a.m. And yet through the day, she's still doing a lot more work than my dad. And she's still the one serving him the dinner and taking away the dinner plate, taking it to the kitchen and so on and so forth. So these boys had seen something that was invisible, that has been invisible to all of us growing up, which is the unpaid care work that women and girls do. What's really valuable about this is you can't unsee it. Once you see that, you're always going to see that and you're always going to ask questions. So what UNGEI is hoping to do through this multi-country program is to really bring together an already strong community of actors to establish the evidence and really advocate for education decision makers to not just say, yes, children are going to go through our schools and learn to read, learn to write, learn about geography, learn about climate change, learn how to interact with each other. They're going to leave our schools with an understanding of human rights and a belief in human rights. Because at the end of the day, what is the point of having a graduate of a school who can, I don't know, maybe win the Nobel Prize for, developing a new tool, or, make $1 billion on technology, if they're not a good person who values the human rights of other people and is able to coexist with them peacefully and with respect. So that is where we believe we need a new movement. We need we need a renewed and more specific focus on children learning to ask questions about themselves, about their roles in society based on gender, which will always be intersectional. And so that means race and ethnicity and so on. And by the way, just one last point and then I'll stop. This may be one of the best ways to create a world in the future that is also accepting of diversity and gender identity. Because what the evidence shows is that boy-on-boy violence and bullying in school is almost always related to some sort of insult and violence related to homosexuality. And so if we are able to begin to tease apart and ask questions and make less sacred the values of masculinity with power and with heterosexuality, that is actually a huge gift, not just for girls, but absolutely for boys as well. So I'm going to stop there and look forward to hearing thoughts and questions, and very much looking forward to hearing from the rest of the speakers. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Antara. I really appreciated you reminding us that this is very new. You know, when you think of MIT, oh yeah, MIT, and you think, wow, only in the 1950s that science was bad for girls' bodies and minds. I'm blown away. So thank you for reminding us that actually all of the movements that surround identity, whether gender or race or culture, all of those movements are very new. From what you said, what little thing can all of us do that would help? You know, we can't necessarily go to school and say, hey, boys, we're going to do this. We may not be in the positions of power to create a larger scale movement, but how can we do something? What small bite strategy can we use in our day-to-day lives that will move the movement forward, that will, help us be better at understanding that gender roles are social constructs and begin to move the needle in changing our ideas of what gender means?
Thank you for that. Well, first of all, I think most empowered women, and it certainly seems like you are one as well, we've been fighting harmful gender norms our lives to be where we are. And many men have too, and certainly LGBTQI colleagues. So to the extent that we can not be a passive bystander. So when somebody says something harmful around gender norms, to be the person to speak up and say, well, you know, I don't think it's funny that you made that joke, because actually women suffer a lot because of the way they are objectified and sexualized. So please don't do that. I think men, if you're able to speak back to men friends and colleagues and say, I don't find that dad joke funny. And why are you saying that I'm babysitting my own child? I'm parenting my own child. So, those kinds of things, to the extent that we don't bystand the ongoing harmful rhetoric around gender norms, that's fantastic. And to the extent that for the children in our lives, whether they are your friends' kids, your nieces, your nephews, don't subscribe to the trucks for boys and girls for dolls schema. No blue for boys and pink for girls. Everybody can wear all colors. The more of us that there are who do that, inshallah, one day you walk into a Walmart or you shop online at the Gap, there isn't going to be clothes for toddler boys and clothes for toddler girls, because guess what? Those bodies don't need different clothes based on their biological sex.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that makes us all have to reflect, the gender reveal parties and those things. And it's not that you can't enjoy those things for you, but also be very aware of what that does in the larger scale of things. So thank you again, Antara. We really do appreciate it.